If you got a Bible, Matthew chapter 6. You got to find it, get on a phone, whatever it's going to take. Matthew chapter 6. We have been in this series called Different, where really we've been looking at the words of Jesus in this teaching of Jesus, and we've been listening in really to Jesus talking to his disciples and then a bunch of people around him, which included some religious leaders and some people curious about him. And really what we've been doing is coming to understand that what Jesus said is remarkably relevant to today, in part because what he said was so different than anything anybody else in his cultural moment was saying. It was very different than what the Roman Empire was saying. It was very different than what the religious leaders and organizations of the day were saying. It was just very different. And it's still very different today. All of the words of Jesus are really, they truly are oftentimes at odds with everything else we're hearing. It's very, very different. And inside of Jesus different, he's inviting us to all of this life. And so last week we talked about what does it look like when Jesus just starts rolling out all of these things about hate and murder and retaliation and anger and adultery and lust. And we just had some candid conversation around those and why is Jesus doing it. And we came to understand part of why Jesus is doing it is he's trying to help us say, look, you can't keep the code, the law. You can't keep the religious regulations. In fact, the law was originally given to help you know what relationship with me could look like because every relationship has rules. You don't have a healthy relationship in your life that doesn't have rules. Whether you've spoken them out loud or not, you have rules of how your relationship works. And so does God inside of his. And he's like, look, I'm giving you these rules to show you how much I want relationship and to ultimately show you that you can't actually do this without me. It's a relationship of engagement and dependency. It's a relationship of engagement and dependency. And so we understand that Jesus said here, you take my righteousness. Here, you can't keep this, but you can be me. I took all your sin. Here, you have my righteousness. And we receive that, and then we embrace the power of the Spirit that enables us to actually live a new life. A brand new life. The trajectory of life, the track of life, forever different. We just sang about it. It's true. It's like we literally were singing the story of God in Scriptures. But then we kind of left it there. We say, okay, now, so what do we do with that? I embrace his righteousness. I embrace the power of the Spirit. But can we talk a little bit about what that would look like in day-to-day living? Like, where does that go? Well, I mean, Jesus is really kind, and he's a great teacher, so that's actually what he talks about next. Like, that's actually where he goes in this teaching that he's doing to disciples, people around. So we're going to look, Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. Here's where he starts it. Like, he's just talked about this righteousness, now to live it. And then he says, beware of practicing your righteousness. Will you just say those three words with me? Here we go. Let's say them. Practicing your righteousness before other people with the motive of being seen by them, because if you do that, then you'll have no reward from your Father who actually is in heaven. Jesus says, okay, you've got this righteousness that I gave you. You have a condition that's right with me, perfectly right with me. But that condition of rightness with me gets shaped in our conduct over the rest of our life through him and through the power of his Spirit. And he says, so while you're practicing it, do you hear the assumption in that? It's not like you should go practice living this. You should go do this. It's like, hey, while you're doing it, I want to just give you a warning. But you're going to do it. You're going to practice this. And practice is the reminder that it's not yet perfect. Right? We don't live it perfectly every time. Practice is the reminder that it's kind of constant. Practice is best when there's repetition and when there's consistency and when there's a rhythm to it, right? It's like, okay, this is how we're going to live. I've given you a condition of righteousness, and now you're, with my strength and my help, you're going to practice living it out. And it's really helpful because practice is revealing. Right? I mean, practice is when you practice anything, right? Like a sport, a musical instrument, a sales pitch, a presentation, whatever it is you practice, it's very revealing. If you're honest, it doesn't take you long to recognize what you're pretty good at and what still needs some work, right? Practice is really revealing. And then our willingness to keep practicing is also revealing. Like, do I want to continue to get better? Do I want to set a personal best? Do I want to accomplish more in that? Right? I mean, practice is kind of revealing of our resilience and our determination, how bad we want something. There's two other things that Jesus says in this passage that practice reveals. The first one is motive. It reveals motive. Like, why am I doing this? Did you catch those words of Jesus? Be careful not to practice your righteousness. Be careful not to practice living life with me just to be seen by other people. Don't do it just to be seen by other people. Like, what's really the motive? Are you practicing living life with me in a way that is lovingly responding to my love for you? Are you practicing living life with me because what we sang today is true, that he is holy, there's nobody like him, his name is greatest, his name is highest, he is forever actually the Holy One? Like, he's like, hey, just every now and then when you practice, check the motive. But then like the next thing, it actually reveals the reward. I love that Jesus basically in this moment acknowledges that walking with me does come with a reward. Right, which sometimes gets awkward, like in religious environments, like, can't be any reward in it, can't do it for any reason to get anything, right? No, like, you got to remember, like, God's generous, like, he's, like, liberally generous, just outlandishly generous. He's a perfect Father. He does want to bless. And so Jesus says, look, you're going to get a reward. You just pick which one. You're going to get a reward. You can get the reward of the pat on the back and the cheer and your name on a building and an accolade you can do it for that. Or you can do it just to honor me and trust me and as part of our ongoing loving relationship. You pick. But if you pick this one, you'll lose this one. But if you pick this one, you'll often keep this one anyway. Right? Jesus isn't saying every time you get an affirmation for something good you did, boy, you must have been off base. You blew it. No, he's like, look, what's your motive? And our practice reveals that, like, why am I doing this? And then Jesus, because he's helpful, again, Jesus is practical, he starts listing just examples, not an exhaustive list, of ways we practice. Ways that we actually practice and experiment with living out this righteous, ways that we could evaluate and see, ways that could be revealing to us. Let's look at one. We're going to pick up in verse 2. Still Jesus talking. He said, so when you give to the needy, don't go sounding the trumpet before you and posting it on social media to celebrate what you did. That's what hypocrites do in synagogues and in streets. And they do that so that they could be praised by other people. But truly, I say to you, that's their whole reward. That's it. But when you give to the needy, when you see a need in an organization or in a person or in a family, or when you see a need, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Right off the bat, she's like, hey, practice giving. Practice giving. This is part of what we do. Like, we practice giving. Like, Jesus is here to give his life for people. He's inviting us to giving. He says, but when you do it, just check the motive. Now, look. Is it practical to think that every financial gift or gift of some substance or every car you're going to go, is it practical to think that all of those are literally going to always be in secret? Probably not. You probably won't figure out a way to give every gift of your life anonymously. Probably not. It's not the goal. It's just Jesus saying, what's the motive? Your practice reveals the motive. Why are you giving that? Why do you then talk about it the way you talk about it? Do you have an expectation of something in return? Do you have an expectation of something coming back? Do you even have an expectation of a thank you? Sometimes I still have to work on that one. Just this weekend, it was super small. But just this weekend, I got a chance to give something to somebody. It was super small. It's not a big deal. Then I was like, now, did it matter? They didn't even say thanks. Boom. Well, John, you just got to like practice and reveal your own motive. Right? I'm like, that's terrible. Like, let's not preach on this anymore, okay? But you got to check it sometimes, right? Jesus, what's the motive? Would you just give for the sake of giving? Would you give for the sake of obedience? Would you give because you're practicing living out this character that I've given you? And I actually give. So practice giving. And you can even ask yourself today, when's the last time I saw a need and met it? When's the last time I saw an opportunity? When's the last time I learned an ordinance or a way that's normal for every follower of Jesus to handle and steward his money and possessions? And did I do it? And why did I do it? Why did I do it? It's part of how we practice. Jesus goes on. Fairly common passage of Scripture here. Jesus goes on and he says, and when you pray, verse 5, and when you pray, again, don't be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues. They rally at the church all the time, and they really just, they do it on the street corners, and they really just do that so they could be seen by others, and that's what the Pharisees were doing in the day. The religious leaders of the day, they weren't praying so much to be heard by God as they were to be highly esteemed by people. And he said, truly I say to you, they've received their reward. Again, that's it. You can choose the reward. That's the end of theirs. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret, well, then he'll reward you. And when you pray, don't heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do. They think that they'll be heard for their many words, right? Which I like that because it just shows, man, you don't get bonus points for long prayers. You don't get bonus points for long prayers. Yeah. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need even before you ask him. Pray then like this. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And then he tags on this idea that if you forgive others, which is part of this prayer, right, their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. You could experience it. But if you don't forgive others their trespasses, then you don't really know the Father's forgiveness, and you're not really experiencing the Father's forgiveness. Now, isn't it interesting? Jesus, again, uses this thing of do something in secret. Isn't that interesting? Pray in secret. And a lot of you, you do that. You love that. And I have my own time where I just pray and everything else. And some of you have these things called prayer closets, and you close doors, and there's things on them. I love it. Charge on. More. It's great. But do you know what's interesting is that right after that, Jesus gives a model of a prayer and uses the words our, us, and we 6 times. Those are all collective words. Those are all together words. Jesus didn't say, so when you go pray, my Father who is in heaven, give me my day. It's our. Again, Jesus has a lot of assumption in these, and the assumption is we would also pray together. That there would be, again, this strength in number. That people like us would rally, and we would be in environments like this, and we would be praying, and we would be praying hard in our small groups and with ministry teams, and that we would be rallying on First Tuesdays, and we would be pushing in together. There's a collective, there's a nature to it. There's an element of community to it. It's don't only get caught with this issue of physical secrecy in environments. Don't evaluate necessarily who's around. Evaluate why are you praying with those who are around. What's the aim? She's practice it. Practice it. Don't stop praying. Don't not pray. Don't not pray in your small group or with your family or with your friends or on a First Tuesday. Don't avoid those. Come to those because they're the perfect chance to practice your righteousness. Practice praying. Just practice praying. There's so much good in that too, because it does remind us there's not an arrival point with prayer. You just start. And if you've been praying for decades, do you know what the beauty of that is? There's still more to be discovered in praying. You won't exhaust it. Like there's not an end to the depth, to the intensity, to the beauty of it. It's like practice praying. Let it be the whole. Let's read one more. Jesus plays out here. Verse 16. He says, and when you fast, all these assumptive things, giving was fine, prayer was fine, go without food, now it's awkward. And when you fast, don't look gloomy like the hypocrites, these spiritual leaders who would like make themselves look all gaunt and famished and everything else, right? He said, for they disfigure their faces that their fasting could be seen by others, so that they would hopefully have other people looking and thinking, oh, they are so spiritual. Truly, I say to you again, they've got their reward in full. But when you fast, because of course you will fast, right? But when you fast, because of course you will fast, anoint your head, wash your face, look fresh, so that your fasting doesn't have to be seen by others, but you just know it's noticed by your Father who's in secret. And your Father is in secret. Here it is again. He'll reward you. As much as Jesus would be like, hey, practice giving, practice praying, he's like, hey, practice fasting. Like, practice fasting. As much as giving would be normal and prayer would be normal, so would fasting. Practice fasting. Practice this dynamic of going without something, most often food, for the sake of quieting the clutter of the world and life to be more available and open to what Jesus is doing. We fast not for the sake of like getting on a diet and shedding some pounds. We fast for the sake of clearing clutter to hear Jesus. We fast not for the sake of getting ready to something so we can show Jesus how serious we are. We fast to get rid of some clutter so we can be serious about hearing him. There's this invitation. Jesus says, man, when you fast, practice giving, practice praying, practice fasting. When's the last time like you just went without something because you so badly wanted to hear Jesus? And I would challenge you to say, like, when's the last time you went without food? Like a meal, a day, 3 days. But when's the last time you went without news and media and all those? When's the last time? I was going to tell you, I went a long chunk of days, August and September, where I just refused to look at anything that was news. Nothing. I just, as hard as I could, I tried to eliminate it. And so literally the only thing that kind of just pulled me back in a little bit is when things started to happen in the Middle East, right? And I was kind of like, probably 12 or 18 hours late to that because I just didn't know. Somebody had to tell me. And do you know what happened in those days, that like probably 45-ish days with no news? The world kept going. My life was still fine. I didn't really miss anything. It was good. I was fine. I didn't break out in hives. Nothing changed in Washington, which, I mean, you should know that anyway, right? I mean, it kind of is what it is, right? The world's still broken. Jesus is still the hope, right? I mean, those things were all still true, right? What is it that can clutter, and what is it you would say? No, Jesus, like, just practice fasting. Practice getting rid of something for a season so that you could hear me more completely. And Jesus, talking from experience, he fasted 40 days. No food, bro. No food, 40 days. I don't encourage you to start there. I guess practice that. And then kind of we do this thing of we practice evaluating. We practice evaluating. We don't practice being super judgmental and condemning to ourselves, but we do practice evaluating. Where is my practice leading me? Why am I doing it? What am I building up? Look what Jesus says, kind of to finish this section of his message. He says, don't lay up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but instead do a completely different thing. All of this is so different. We're not giving to be noticed. We're giving to honor Jesus and trust in him and express our trust. We're not praying to be noticed. We're praying because we believe this is how we communicate with God, and we need each other, and we rely on each other in it. We're not fasting to try and earn something for God. We're fasting to make ourselves available. It's so different. Don't just build up treasures now. Don't just only build the retirement fund. Don't just only build the dream vacation. Don't just only build, like those are all fine, but don't just, like that's not the most dependable thing. He says, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust or a downturn in the economy or a significant loss in your life can destroy, and where thieves can't break in and steal. Because where your treasure is, well, that's the revealer of where your heart is. Where your treasure is, when you go looking to see where your treasure is, you'll find where your heart is. When you go exploring, where am I putting my best? Where am I giving my best? Where am I giving my first? Where am I putting my greatest energy? You'll find where your treasure is. It will. That's why practice is revealing. Like Jesus, like where your treasure, that's where your heart is. The eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light is in you, is darkness, how great is that darkness? That's this whole picture Jesus is painting about the mind and how we think. And he says this, no one can actually serve two masters. For either you're going to hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and you will despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And the word that Jesus uses there for money depicts money as an idol. It can be an idol. Isn't it funny how prevalent and relevant that was 2,000 years ago, and it's still so relevant today? I mean, my word, Jesus could have, literally, we don't even need to change. It just is. It just is. And so what Jesus has done is he's kind of given us these four things. I want to just show them to you in one glance. He's like, hey, there's giving, right? There's giving, we want you to practice it. There's praying, practice that. There's fasting, practice that. And there's treasuring. Like, where are you treasuring? Look at it. Follow what you treasure most, what gets your best, what gets your first. Like, follow that. Follow that. I want you to see one more thing, because I think sometimes we lose track a little bit of how much Jesus highlights certain things. Let's look at it this way. What Jesus really did is he covered four things, but he really covered three. He covered money, prayer, fasting, money. Money, prayer, fasting, money. Money. Do you see the first one and the last one? And they're the same. Isn't that interesting? It's uncomfortable because Jesus, even then, like 2,000 years ago, what Jesus knew with all these people, religious leaders, political leaders, Roman leaders, tax collectors, followers, what Jesus knew about all of them, fishermen, business owners, carpenters, what Jesus knew about all of them is that money would be such a significant issue in how they practiced their righteousness that he talks about it more than prayer, more than faith, twice as much as heaven and hell. Jesus talks about it all the time. In one little block of a message, Jesus is like, let's talk about prayer and fasting because those are big, but whoo, we should probably talk about money again. I wonder, did Jesus ever get tired of talking about it? Because it's so essential. He's like, this could make or break how we live this righteousness. So here's the question as we practice this righteousness, as we practice living out this right conduct. Here's what is so helpful for us to just understand is that Jesus is trying to help us live out who he fully made us to be. He's trying to help us live his nature in his character. He's trying to put that in us. And so he talks about these things, and we could maybe drift to one of them. And we could say, well, let's just talk about just prayer. Let's just talk about fasting, or let's just talk about the money component for a minute. But Jesus takes a very different approach, and he pushes all of these together. He sandwiches them together, saying, hey, money's really important, and it's going to have an impact on everything else, and everything else is going to have an impact on money. And what he really says is this, is that your prayer and fasting life, it will be more firmly built on the rock of Jesus and his teaching when your money life is built on the rock of his teaching. Jesus, we started several weeks ago right here at the end of this. Matthew chapter 7, Jesus ends with build your life on a rock. You can do it on sand, and I'll let you, but man, it'll grieve me. I won't get super mad at you, but it'll break my heart to watch the sand. If you build your life on a sand, it'll break my heart to watch it just continually get swept away, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways. But I want to give you a rock so that when storms swirl around you and in you, when you have great loss, when you have great success, when you experience great turmoil, or when you experience great peace, your life is built on this rock, and it's very, very sure and stable. And so all along the way, he says, like, if you want your life on a rock, just, like, take my words. Like, take my words for what they are. And in this little section, he's like, hey, if you will build your money life on the rock of my teaching, your prayer and fasting life will actually benefit. And if you will build your prayer and fasting life on the rock of my teaching, well, yeah, your money life will benefit too. Right? Why? Because he likes to reward. So part of the question we ask is we pull back and we say, okay, not just how's my prayer life, not just how's my fasting life, not just how's my read the Bible life, not just how's my go to church life, but hey, how's my money life? Am I doing the most basic things that Jesus said? Have I settled once and for all? Have I finally settled the issue of the tithe? The first 10% just goes back to Jesus. Have I settled that? Have I just built it on the rock that that's what he said, literally, from Genesis to Revelation of Scripture, that's what I'm going to do? Have I settled that when there's a need beyond that, I'll respond to the prompting? When there's something beyond that, and I want to just invite us to come back and just ask that question, like, where are we with that? What do we do to practice? There's three pieces that we live this out with, right? We evaluate, we surrender, and we go practice again. We evaluate, we surrender, and we go practice again. We evaluate, hey, Jesus, just where are we? Why am I praying? And am I only praying where I'm hoping to be seen by other people? Why am I giving? Have I settled the most basic of giving issues first? You said to give the tithe. It's the only thing that you complimented these Pharisees on that you're pointing out are hypocrites in most things in their life. The only thing you cheered them for is they'd settled the tithing issue. Like, how am I doing in that? And then would I just surrender? Would I surrender my prayer life to you? And would I surrender maybe what feels like the weakness of my prayer life or the strength of my prayer life? Would I surrender to you my discomfort around this thing of fasting and going without in order to press anymore? Would I just surrender that? And now let's go practice again. We'll go practice again. I'll go practice again. I'll go practice again. I'll shoot more free throws. I'll run more miles. I'll knit more clothes. I'll fix more car. Whatever our practice is, I'll go practice again. I'll go practice again. I'll go pray again. I'll go fast again. I'll give again. I'll evaluate again. I'll surrender again. I'll go practice again. It's a relational rhythm. It's like Jesus, like, you're going to need me to do this. So here's the question for us in this moment. We spent a lot of time this morning early on singing about a holy God and how great he is and significant, perfect he is. Amen, he is. And some of us, we're so close, like, to experiencing that in new ways. I mean, we're like on the very edge of the threshold of that. And some of us, the like one moved, experience it differently today, is to make a choice to surrender. To surrender the prayer life and the fear of it or the anxiety of it or the arrogance of it or whatever it is to surrender the money and keep debating and quit debating God with it. And it's to surrender. I'm going to try fasting. I'm going to try fasting. I'm going to try fasting. I've never done it, and I'm definitely not telling anybody because I'm not even sure I can do it. Right? But I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. I'm going to practice. There's a move for us to make.